Martin, many thanks. Now, the warm, dry spring that most of us enjoyed should have given a timely boost to sales of beer in the UK. Brewers certainly need a little help. Beer sales declined in the first quarter of 2011, part of a long-term downward trend. Heineken UK accounts for about 26% of the beer market, with brands including Foster's and Kronenbourg. The company also has 50% of the cider market through Strongbow and Bulmers. And the brewer employs around 2,300 people in the UK who produce about 2.5 billion pints of beer and cider a year. Well, joining me at the Gherkin is the Managing Director of Heineken UK, Stefan-Sky. Stefan, nice to see you. Many thanks for coming in. So, we had the driest spring since 1893, the warmest spring since 1910. How was it for you at Heineken?
Well, look, the weather, of course, helps. But ultimately, this is a long-term game. Brand building is a long-term game, and we are brand builders. So yes, weather is helpful, but that's not the key to our business.
No, you can't bank on the British weather. That would be the road to ruin, I'm sure. What about the long term? You mentioned that. Over many years now, beer sales in the UK have been in decline. Why is that, and where are all the missing drinkers going?
Well, I think underlying all of that has been lifestyle change, has been the entry of other categories, a lot more noise also in the media. But I think ultimately...
Noise in the media? What do you mean?
Yes, by noise in the media, I mean consumers being ultimately bombarded by all sorts of messages from whether it's phones or whether it's all sorts of other categories that are trying to grab attention. But ultimately...
You slightly lost me there.
Okay.
How does Heineken compete with a phone company?
Well, ultimately, consumers can only take in so many messages.
Okay.
So lots of categories, lots of businesses are competing for their attention. And we're part of that space. So ultimately, I think it is upon us as brewers, and actually as cider makers, to keep our brands exciting, to keep our brands interesting, and to keep our categories interesting so that consumers want to come back to them.
Be delighted to know that I've never had any trouble in finding beer more interesting than telephones. But anyway,
that's fantastic.
What about the ongoing battle between the government and supermarkets over the pricing of booze and beer generally? I mean, I realise you don't really want to be in the middle of that, but you can't help it because it's your products that they're selling so cheaply. What's your stance on it now?
Look, let me say first of all that heavy discounting to drive footfall doesn't really sit well with responsible consumption, which is important to us. But importantly, what we're doing is working very hard with our customers to come up with a different way of selling and promoting beer to ultimately make it a much more interesting experience for the shopper.
But as long as the supermarkets have such a grip on the retail spectrum, it's going to be pretty hard to wriggle out of that, isn't it? I mean, before I came into London this afternoon, I went into my local Tesco, and there was a big display. They weren't price cutting as such, but what they were doing was saying 3 packs of beer for the price of 2, including Heineken.
Well, as I say, it is important to us, and it is important to them ultimately to do things right. And we're working very hard together on ultimately proposing to the shopper, a very different environment, a different shopping environment. And our consumers are actually telling us that's what they'd like to see. So I'd say watch this space.
What about the brand itself, Heineken?
Yeah.
What does it stand for? Because you've spent an enormous amount of money over the years promoting it. And yet I get the sense that it means different things in different countries. So, for instance, compare the United States with the UK.
Well, look, ultimately, Heineken is the world's #1 premium beer. Heineken's present in some 176 countries around the world.
But it's not sold as a premium beer here, is it?
It is sold in all countries as a premium beer. We took the decision in 2003, because you'll recall probably the 3.4% ABV Heineken, which had been present in this market for quite some time. We took, I think, the very brave decision in 2003 to withdraw that formula from the market and put in the same recipe and the same marketing mix that we've got everywhere around the world. So now when you turn on your TV or watch, for example, the Champions League, you will see the same sort of messages and the same sort of communication communication that you might see, whether it's in the US or in South America or in Asia, because ultimately this is the world's best premium beer brand, and that's where we're going in the UK.
You clearly believe in the power of sport in this country and elsewhere. Heineken Rugby, of course, John Smith's another of your brands, the Grand National, Heineken and football. Why does sport work so well for you?
Well, I think sport, but generally sponsorship, is a great way of connecting with consumers and connecting ultimately with the right consumers. And that's about a great opportunity to market our brands, and as you mentioned, it's Heineken, it could be John Smith's, it could be comedy for Foster's, which maybe you've seen.
Of course.
But it's also an opportunity for us, and this is important to us, to convey the right messages about responsible consumption, to promote right behaviours, right actions. No doubt you watched the final, I hope, of the Champions League.
You wouldn't have missed it for the world.
You wouldn't have missed it. So no doubt you saw quite a lot of responsibility messaging that was watched not only by people in the UK, but actually hundreds of millions of people around the world.
And about the national treasure that is Newcastle Brown. You own that. I don't see it much these days. Are you allowing it just to wither on the vine?
Of course we wouldn't do that. It is a national treasure, and no doubt in your travels in the US you will see it increasingly successful. So this is something that we will nurture.
Really? So this is a brand that can go international?
Well, it is right now. So again, if you go to New York and go down to your local bar in Manhattan, no doubt you'll find it.
I shall test that the next time in the States. Stefan, nice to see you. Many thanks for coming in.